I'm Jen from That Mama Book Nook, and welcome back to my channel. Long time no chat. I really do want to focus a little bit more on my YouTube channel, like I mentioned in some of my goals for this year. January and February were not super kind to me, but I have high hopes for months going forward, so we're just gonna give it a go. But I'm going to rewind a little bit and talk about last year. I've still decided that I wanted to share my favorite and a couple least favorite reads of 2025. I feel like I'm a pretty generous rater. I don't necessarily have a ton of 5-star reads, but most of my reads fall in that 3.5 to 4.5 range, and I do have a good amount of 5-star reads. Very rarely do I rate a book under 3 stars, and I've never rated a book 1 star. So I gathered all of my 5-star reads and picked a handful of those that I wanted to shout out in this video, as well as a few 4.5-star reads that I felt deserved some honorable mentions for specific reasons. And then in 2025, I only had 4 books that were under 3 stars, so I will talk about those. I think this goes without saying, but these are just my humble opinions about these books, why they worked or didn't work for me, and that doesn't say anything about you or me if my least favorite books were your favorite or my favorite books were your least favorite. Totally fine. I actually enjoy when people feel differently about books than I did. I think it's kind of fun to hear the reasons why, and I'm not offended by it. Also, I will get to it, but one of my least favorite books, I have questions, so if you read it and loved it, I need to know. Okay, so let's start off with my number 1 favorite read of 2025. If you've been on my channel or definitely on my Instagram, this will come as no surprise, but that is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you have not read this book, please do. I feel like it is a book that will speak to like a wide variety of audiences. It kind of fits like a couple different genres, and it's just a really good read. We've got space, we've got high stakes, we have romance, we have drama, we have family drama, we have found family, women in STEM. It's set in the 1980s, so we have historical fiction, some fun vibes there, and it won the 2025 Historical Fiction Goodreads Choice Awards last year. So it was also nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award in audiobooks and came in second. I think it was behind Onyx Storm. So, I mean, listen to it, read it, definitely pick it up. And just to stick with Taylor Jenkins Reid, I also read One True Loves in 2025 and also gave this one 5 stars. This is completely different from Atmosphere in most of the ways, so don't necessarily go into it because you enjoyed Atmosphere, but it's another one that I really, really recommend. This one came out several years ago, so this is definitely a backlist book. If you are not familiar with this one, this is about Jesse and Emma, who grew up together, fell in love, got married, and promised to travel the world together. Then on their 1-year wedding anniversary, Jesse was traveling and taking a helicopter, and his helicopter went down and was not found. Jesse is presumed dead. Emma is obviously devastated. She feels intensely broken, so she quits her job. She moves back home to her small town in Massachusetts and slowly tries to put herself back together again. A few years later, she bumps into Sam, another friend from high school, and they hit it off. And Emma realizes that she's ready to open herself back up to love again, so they start dating and eventually even get engaged. Now, years after Jesse's disappearance, she gets a really unexpected phone call. Jesse's alive, and he's been doing everything to get back to her. So I usually despise love triangles, but this is a perfect example of a case where I never say never to any trope, because when done well, it just works. I loved this one, and the way it made me ponder and kind of get anxious about what I would do if I was in Emma's situation. I couldn't help but try to put myself myself in her shoes, and it absolutely tore me up. But for me, that's truly a sign of a fantastic book. One that pulls real emotion out of me and will stick with me for a long time. Also, I loved the location in this book because it's a place that I have visited many, many times, and that was just kind of a fun little added bonus for me. My second favorite book of 2025, and I really only probably rated the top two and the bottom two, but that was The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. This may look familiar to you because I did a whole vlog on this one on my channel, because this was the 2024 historical fiction nominee choice that everyone voted for last year that I read then early 2025. Because I've done a whole vlog, I'm not going to go too in depth, but this is about midwife Martha Ballard, a real person. It takes place in Maine in the year 1789 and kind of revolves around a scandal that rocks their small town. I enjoyed the New England vibe as well as the midwife main character. I often enjoy books that have medical aspects, especially when they are well researched. And then this one had the historical aspect to it as well, which just got my brain going. I found it really interesting. I absolutely loved the writing of Martha's character. I really felt like the author brought us, the readers, in so deep with her, and it really made me connect with her, especially as she was still trying to do things that were right, even if like her entire town disagreed with her. I enjoyed all the shocking moments. There was some good, some bad. Check your triggers as always, and all the information we got on different diseases during that time, how fascinating and devastating diseases were during this time period, and to kind of reflect on how far we've come with modern medicine. I also loved learning about Martha Ballard as a real person and the importance of the written word, kind of during all timelines, but especially during, historical time. No spoilers, but don't miss the author's note at the end, but also don't read it early. The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, another favorite read of 2025. This is a very well-known book about Linus Baker, who is a caseworker at the department in charge of magical youth, or DICOME. He oversees the well-being of children in orphanages, and just by his personality, he plays very much by the rule book. One day, Linus is brought to extremely upper management for a top secret case, very classified, where he will be assigned to an orphanage that is on an island where 6 highly dangerous children reside. There is a gnome, a sprite, a wyvern, a were-Pomeranian, an unidentified green blob, and the Antichrist. The children are cared for by Arthur Parnassus. There's lots of secrets that reside on this island as well, and Linus must decide whether these 6 children and Arthur can continue to live there and the orphanage can continue to be operated, or if it needs to be shut down. This is such a sweet book with such lovely representation and really a great message at its heart. It may be a sweet, fun read at surface level, and that's fine sometimes too, but it's also a wonderful book just to think just a little bit deeper and read between the lines, so to speak. They have themes of not judging books by its cover, being yourself, that different doesn't mean bad, and more. I absolutely adored the story and the character growth, especially the way that Linus came out of his shell and found his people and really his home. The characters in general, though, are really what make this book a 5-star read. Each of the children at the orphanage are fantastic. Linus, his cat, Arthur, some of the townspeople, they all brought such hope and wonder, and in today's world, and really in any timeline, we need more of it. This book made me laugh and cry a little bit, and those are honestly some of the best books. Easily a favorite. Okay, this is the first book that I have read by this author, but I ate it up, joined her street team, was gifted another of her books, and plan to dive into her backlog as I anxiously await her next. I just loved it so much, and that is Worth the Fall by Laura Beth. Dr. Holly Carrington is having the worst day of her life. She has had a panic attack in the middle of a busy day during an ER shift. She has to leave work, her fiance doesn't care, and she almost gets knocked over by a stranger. The stranger, though, is a man with kind eyes who escorts her to a local cafe just to listen. Holly, though, soon after has to run, and neither of them catch each other's name. Holly and her fiance eventually end things, and work insists that she return very, very slowly. So she takes a position at just a clinic, and who walks in but the kind stranger. We find out his name is Grayson. Holly takes care of a cut on his arm, and soon their lives just seem to continue to intertwine. After a house call, they decide to keep seeing each other kind of as friends first, but it obviously grows into more. Holly also is enjoying learning more about his farm life, and as these feelings grow, Holly now has to kind of make a decision about which life she wants to live, because they are very different. Her one in the city, or this one in the country with Grayson. This was obviously everything I love in a romance, and then some. I loved how Holly and Grayson in the beginning kept coming into each other's lives repeatedly, like it was meant to be. The universe was sending them a message. They honestly felt like real people and less like characters in a book. As I was reading them, I was just rooting for them so hard. Reading about Holly's mental health struggles broke my heart, but Grayson's warmth and kindness and gentleness with her just put it back together. In general, I love when an author puts real mental health representation in a book, takes the time to do it accurately, and handle it with so much care. And that was absolutely the case with this one. Holly and Grayson's slow burn relationship was absolute perfection, and who doesn't love a small town with found family elements? Great side characters, including hilarious goats, kind of that rounded out this novel, setting up for a fantastic series, I'm sure. Friends have been telling me to read Laura Beth for years, literally, and I have always wanted to, but just never got around to it. Well, now I have a backlog to get to while I wait for book 2, which is Worth the Hurt, which is coming out in April, so I don't actually have to wait too long at this point. Also, the author has said that book 2 will not have a happy ending, so I am ready to have my heart broken. Luckily, book 3 will continue book 2's couple's story and will have a happy ending, so we'll get there eventually, but oh, it's gonna be a big one for the feels. I also, of course, have to shout out 2 firefighter romances that I read in 2025 that also made my 5-star favorites list. That is Left of Forever by Tara DeWitt and From Nowhere by Julie Ann. I talked about both of these a little bit more in my firefighter romance recommendation video, but obviously I made a whole video on this. This subgenre of romance is an absolute favorite, so the fact that I got to read 2 last year, loved them both, they're definitely up there. More briefly, a few others that I loved this year that I wanted to mention. Good Grief by Sarah Goodman Confino. She has become such a favorite author of mine, and I just can't wait to read everything that she's written. I've read almost all of her backlist, and she has a new one coming out this year, so I'm super excited about that. Then also The Blonde Identity and The Blonde Who Came In From the Cold by Allie Carter. These were so much fun and just a fun surprise. I didn't really have a lot of expectations going in. I was gifted this one by the publisher kind of out of the blue, and then immediately read the first one so that I could read this one and just absolutely adored them. So much fun. And then the Ever Can Everything by L.J. Andrews. It was my last read of 2025, but it was a 5 stars. And this book, as well as The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen, which gets a quick honorable mention at 4.5 stars, just have really like shotgunned me on my romantasy journey. I ate them up, can't get enough, reading lots this year too, which I can't wait to share. There's just no stopping me now, and I'm having such a fun time. Okay, 2 4.5 star honorable mentions that I just wanted to give a little bit of a longer shout out to. First one being P.S. I Hate You by Lauren Connolly. This is about Maddie. Her brother Josh dies from cancer when he is 27 years old, and she is going to honor his wish of scattering his ashes in 8 different destinations that he never got to visit before he died. He was a big traveler and whatnot. The only problem is that, also per Josh's request, she is paired with his best friend Dominic, who she has quite a complicated history with. I've probably mentioned before, but I don't think there are enough books out there that deal with sibling grief, and this one did such a nice job with it. I absolutely bawled. It lost that half star because while I love a good enemies to lover, I love a good rivals to lover, I'm not a huge fan of hate to love, and I do think that there is a subtle difference between all of those and probably some other ones too, because it made Maddie, our female main character, kind of annoying at times. But again, loved the book overall. And then my last 4.5 star honorable mention is 3/5 by John Bircher. Bobby is a biracial man who passes for white and has lived his life that way his entire life. He also never knew his black father, so he lives with his white mother, and so he has just passed for white. He was raised by his white alcoholic mother and his racist grandfather, and has just hidden the truth from everybody else. His best friend Aaron has just returned home from prison as a newly radicalized white supremacist, and he wants to rekindle his friendship with Bobby. During their first reunion, Bobby witnesses Aaron assault a young black man with a brick. Now, Bobby has 2 secrets he needs to keep, and it's becoming increasingly difficult, partially because his father has just re-entered the picture. Or really, I should say, entered the picture for the first time. This was obviously an intense but super important read, kind of exploring racism in the United States. This book takes place in 1995 in Pittsburgh during the O.J. Simpson trial, which, while that is not necessarily like a main plot point, it is definitely an interesting piece of information to set the stage for this book. And though it's set in 1995, not surprisingly, many of the racial issues are obviously still very much present today. This book also explores themes of parenthood, poverty, friendship, honesty, identity, criminal justice system, and survival. This was not a long book at all, but it really packed a lot in there and didn't necessarily feel like it. So many characters were dealing with difficult situations, but the author was really able to make it very believable. Don't go into it expecting a happy ending for any characters though. The way the tension builds throughout this book had me on absolute edge, and even though I had a feeling that I was going to be left devastated, it did not soften the blow. This is definitely a book that will stick with me and I will think about often. Okay, now for my least favorite reads of the year. As I mentioned, there are only 4 that were under 3 stars. The first 2 were 2.5 star reads, and the second 2 were my bottom 2 star reads. First up is Booked for Murder by P.J. Nelson. This follows Madeline Brimley, who left her small town in Georgia many years ago to go to college and pursue stage acting. She was not super successful, so when she learns that her Aunt Rose has passed away and left her a bookstore, she travels to the small town of Enigma to check it out. When she arrives, Madeline is pretty immediately met with threats that the bookstore bookstore will be burned down if she doesn't leave. And the gazebo in the backyard actually does get burned. Then there is a second fire and a young girl is murdered at the bookstore. Madeline doesn't have a lot of faith in the small town police, so she sets off with one of Aunt Rose's best friends as well as the local priest to investigate on their own. Unfortunately, I could not connect with any of the characters in this book. Madeline herself has no sense of self-preservation. She gets herself in lots of situations of, oops, probably shouldn't have done that, said that, and it just got old really fast. Pretty much everyone in the town had a childish temper. When I think of small town vibes, I think of a close-knit community that found family, but that was definitely not the case here. No one had any compassion for anyone else, and it was honestly a lot darker than I was expecting. Also, as a personal preference, I also don't usually enjoy a book where characters go sleuthing on their own and take matters into their own hands. There's of course a few exceptions, but this book was not one of them. Please stop interfering with police investigations. I don't care how small the town seems or how incompetent the local detectives seem, just stop. The main characters never have any idea what they're doing. The writing overall was fine though, and I did of course enjoy the bookstore setting. It was also an awesome bookstore cat that I would have enjoyed to see more of. Unfortunately, it just ended up being a predictable, not so cozy mystery. Another one that unfortunately didn't work for me, 2.5 stars, was A 40-Year Kiss by Nicholas Butler. Charlie and Vivian were married young in their 20s and subsequently divorced after 4 years. They just had too many issues. 40 years later, Charlie returns to Wisconsin, where it takes place, to try to reconnect with Vivian, even though they haven't been in contact this entire time. They've had other marriages, families, careers, and baggage, let alone the issues that they still harbor from their own marriage years ago. I usually eat up a second chance romance, but I didn't love the premise of this one. 40 years? This wasn't like a misconnection that they just couldn't stop thinking about. They were married and had a life together and it wasn't good. And honestly, a lot of the issues that were there were still there 40 years later. They were able to communicate about the issues better though, and Charlie now has a lot of money, so I guess there is that. The kind of tipping point for me though was also though that the secrets that they were holding on to were kind of unforgivable, and they just let it go. Like, better late than never. And then the writing style also just didn't work for me. I really don't like books that don't use quotations. Why is that a choice? I really wish someone would explain that to me, because that is definitely a choice. It always just distracts me and takes me out of the story when I'm trying to figure out who's talking. Is it out loud or in their head? Just put quotations around the dialogue. It's not hard. I will say that Charlie and Vivian did have some sweet nostalgic moments, especially as a couple in their 60s, but unfortunately I just couldn't get past all the other issues I mentioned to fully enjoy. The next two books were just kind of bizarre. 2 stars. First up, Feeders by Matt Serafini. I need to unhaul this. There's no reason why I need to keep this. I was very interested in the premise of this one, but it ended up being so fever dreamy and other things that I'll get to in a second that I was just left with like, what the heck, and so many questions. This is the one that I referenced at the beginning. Like, I've not run into like anyone else who's read this, but if you have read this, and especially if you liked it, please message me or comment or something, because I have questions. So this is about when a former classmate goes missing and later her brutal murder is leaked online. Kylie Bennington, freshman in college and wannabe influencer, gets curious. She ends up discovering an off-the-grid social media app called Monolife. Anything that Kylie thinks might give her an edge, she wants in. The rules of Monolife appear simple. Interact at least twice daily and never speak about Monolife to anyone who isn't on the app. At first, Kylie tries simple posts that would do well on Instagram or TikTok. No luck. Until one day she flies into a rage against her cheating boyfriend, films herself beating up on him, humiliating him, and posts it, and it goes viral. Turns out Monolife wants honest and awful human behavior. Kylie can do that. Each time Kylie posts, her behavior gets worse and worse, and she's loving it. Monolife creators are also loving it. Maybe a little too much. This book was clearly not for me. It was part body horror, gore, part social commentary on the negative effects of social media and desensitization to violence. And as I said, part fever dream. And I found it pretty disturbing, though I will admit it at least kept me kind of train wreck intrigued. Like you just were like, what is happening? So you kept reading. That's kind of one of the only credits I will give it. Kylie is probably the worst character that I have ever read. And unfortunately, the side characters are not any better. She's supposed to be awful, I'm sure, but how am I supposed to enjoy my reading experience if everyone is the worst of the worst? She's only supposed to be 19, but the things she does, she must have some narcissistic personality disorder. I did find the setting to be a little bit off. They were supposed to be in college. It reads very much like high school. Also, the product placements were over the top. I kind of suspect this was intentional because Kylie cared so much about superficial things and brands, but they read like advertisements, and I kept waiting for it to be revealed, kind of like a Black Mirror episode, that was part of a negative consequence of being on Monolife is that you started becoming this walking advertisement, but it never was revealed for that to be true. Check your triggers if you still want to check this one out, especially my animal lovers. Part of me thinks I just wasn't smart enough. As I said, if you've read this, please someone explain to me what happens in the epilogue. Or maybe young enough, I can't tell you how much slang I googled. But that being said, I don't necessarily believe that any Gen Z person would be this obsessed with Katy Perry, which was the case. And then my least favorite book of 2025 was Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. This was also a 2-star read for me. This one is an award-winning book, so I think this one out of all of them was the most that clearly it's a me problem. I will note that this is a translated book, and lately I've been having a lot of trouble with translated books, just not hitting. I suspect because something, whether in the writing or even the parts of the plot itself, are literally getting lost in translation, and it just does not have that same tone or appreciation or style that it would if it was being read in its original language. But I do not speak Spanish, so I could not read it in its original language even if I wanted to. But this book also had no paragraphs, 0. And I believe only 8 chapters. So while it's not a long book overall, the chapters themselves were kind of long because there was only 8 of them, and then with no breaks. And the content was just incredibly hard to read. Lots of unnecessary, brutal, violent descriptions of heinous actions over and over and over again. It was so bleak. I did read some 5-star reviews because it does have around a 4-star rating on Goodreads. It's won the awards. I was just curious, what do people like about this book that I'm missing? I did find a lot of the 5-star reviews didn't have a lot of info about why they liked it, so that was kind of interesting. I also found a lot of 5-star reviews in Spanish, so again, that kind of supports my theory that it might be better if it was read in its original language. Some people seem to find it exhilarating, kind of the way that I talked about Feeders, that just train wreck can't look away from all this violence. But clearly the shock factor doesn't necessarily do it for me. I don't shy away from books that have that body horror and gore in it necessarily, but it's not what's driving me to a book. But then I did finally read one 5-star review that mentioned that it was giving voice to women who have been killed by men in Mexico. So maybe there is some social political context that I was missing that does give this book a lot more meaning, which actually made me feel kind of sad that I missed that. I honestly wish that it had been written a little bit differently so that I could have learned more about that. I forgot to mention what this book was about, so real briefly, the synopsis is super short. The witch is dead, and the discovery of her corpse by a group of children playing near the irrigation canals propels the whole village into an investigation of how and why this murder occurred. Rumors and suspicions spread. Pretty much it. I don't really feel feel like that synopsis would really warn you enough. But yeah, anyway, least favorite read of the year, unfortunately. Well, I hate to end on that note, but I also didn't want to start with it, so oh well. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite reads of 2025 were. As I mentioned, I know I've had a kind of rough start to 2026 on BookTube, but it is still something that I really want to prioritize this year, so hopefully you will be seeing a lot more of me in the coming months. I have some vlogs planned, some TBRs, I want to do more book reviews, I have some other ideas, so fingers crossed that I can make it all happen. If you are not feeling super chatty though and just want to let me know that you're still here, go ahead and leave me a bumblebee emoji for spring, and I'll see you on my next video, hopefully very soon. Bye!